Well, this morning, I'm going to take you to the book of Esther. Kind of an odd place to take you for a couple of reasons. Do you know Esther is the only book in Scripture that never mentions the name of God? Now, we see God at work. We see His sovereignty at work. And He's always behind the scenes doing some amazing things. And hopefully, it's going to help give you some encouragement today about times in your life where you really wonder, is God really active in my life? I mean, does God really care about some of the things that I might be facing right now? You know, maybe in my health, or maybe in my family, or maybe it's your job situation right now. And you're just wondering, am I being noticed? Does God really understand? And does God know about the needs that I have in my life? And you know, in the Old Testament, there's a term that is used for God. It's one of His titles. It's El Roi, R-O-I. And El Roi means the God that sees, the God that sees. And in this story today about Esther, we pick up on the fact that God is El Roi, that He sees a situation that she's involved in and how He intervenes in this situation and how He makes such a dramatic impact in the life of Esther, and then in the life of a king, and then in the life of a race of people that could have been extinguished if it had not been for a very strong woman who took a stand at a time that it could have cost her her life. And so I want us to take a look at that story today in the book of Esther and work our way through it. And again, happy Mother's Day to all of our moms. I forgot to include those that are online today. Happy Mother's Day to you as well, and all of our ladies here at Piedmont. So while you're turning there, I'm going to take you in a moment to a passage, and this is kind of, this is the end of one series, the starting over without starting over. But in a way, today is what we're going to be doing in the summer months, in the month of June and into July, and that is we're doing a thing. Matt Van Sant came up with this idea that we called it the Summer Book Club, the Book Reading Club. You know how you used to do that when you were a kid? And maybe you got books. I know for us, we had the bookmobile that would come out into our neighborhood, and we'd go out and get books off the bookmobile. We would also steal the hubcaps off the bookmobile just for fun, but you know, that was my neighborhood. And then I had the weekly reader that I used to read. I used to love to subscribe to the weekly reader because I was always a reader. My sister Ramona and Judy kind of gave me that love for reading. And so what we're going to do is during the summer months, on Sunday, we're going to be taking you to a different book of the Bible. Each one of us, Marlon has chosen one, Daniel's chosen one, I'm choosing several, and we're just going to do a one day, hey, this is the book of John, and this is what it really means. And so in some ways, that's kind of what today is, because I'm going to take you to Esther. And again, Esther never had any biological children that we know of, but she became responsible for a group of people that we often call the children of Israel. And as we look at our text that we're going to go to over in Esther chapter 4, there's a lot of things that take place in this story that's pretty remarkable. So we're going to take a look at how Esther had this tremendous courage, how she had resolve in her life, and how she took on an effort, because everything funnels down to there's this one person that can make a difference. There's one person that can change the course of history, and is she going to be willing to do what she needs to do? So Esther's story, kind of the centerpiece of it, is there's this courageous conversation that takes place. And you know, the courageous conversation is the one that we all need to have, but we don't want to have it. Over in August, we'll begin a series in the book of Nehemiah. And in Nehemiah, the first time I preached it here at Piedmont was when I first came on full-time to be the pastor of the church. And our church was in a totally different place then. And I preached a series out of Nehemiah, and I called the whole thing Courageous Conversations. And so the courageous conversation is the one you know that you need to have. You know, sometimes as a family, you need to have the courageous conversation around finances. Sometimes the courageous conversation is, how are we going to raise our children? The courageous conversation is if you have premarital counseling and you go to a great counselor, you have to be honest with that counselor. You have to get advice from that counselor. And that's why all the time I encourage people, if you're going to get married and you're going to spend thousands of dollars on a wedding, you surely need to go and get professional counseling for you to be able to have courageous conversations, because they're always going to come up in your marriage. They're going to come up in different seasons in your marriage. You know, the neighborhood you're going to live in, the school that your children are going to attend. There's always these opportunities for courageous conversations. Now, the one that Esther is going to have had to just make her overwhelmed, because there been this interesting situation. And again, it's in the book of Esther. And what's happening in the book of Esther is that there is a king, Ahasuerus. And King Ahasuerus has a queen, and her name is Vashti. And so King Ahasuerus and Vashti are having this party. How many of you like to have parties? Let me see your hand. Y'all like to have parties? All right. Well, this is about a party. Now, this is an amazing party. How many of you have ever had a party and it seemed like no one was ever going to go home? And I see your hands. I mean, you know, they just keep staying around. I used to have a friend that when he'd have a party at his house, he'd honest to goodness do this. He would just stand up and say, well, hey, I'm going to go ahead and don't let me keep y'all up. And he would go into bed. He would just, you know, ease out of the crowd and go up and have a seat and then, you know, lay down. So in this party that King Ahasuerus is having, are you ready for this? It lasted 180 days. Yeah, baby, that's a party right there. I mean, we're talking some serious cash that you're doing as an outlay. And King Ahasuerus, I mean, you begin to get the idea this guy's a little bit narcissistic, right? And he's a little bit about himself, because he's brought in all these princes from the provinces, and he wants them to see how wealthy he is, how much money he has. So he's putting on this huge party and everything. And so as he's putting on this party, you kind of get a real feel for who he is, because he sends for the queen. And so the queen and the king didn't always just hang out together. And so he sends for the queen, Vashti, and he says, I want you to come out and I want to show you off so everybody will see how beautiful you are and the fact that you're mine. And King Vashti had evidently talked to Robin at some point in her life, because she said, no, not today, big boy. Not going to do it. Not going to come out and be paraded. And so he sent back basically her group of handlers and said, now you need to go back and you need to convince Vashti she needs to come on out. And Vashti sends back word again, not going to do it. Not going to come out there. Not going to be paraded around. So King Ahasuerus decides that he's going to divorce her, that he's going to separate from her. And so when that happens and when that takes place, now the story I'm telling you is taking place over years. So I'm giving you a condensed version. Then when they separate, then he needs a new queen. And so he holds a contest. And the contest is who's going to be the next queen of the nation of Persia. And so when they hold this contest, all of these eligible young ladies that want to be paraded before the king come, and they find this one named Esther. Now, Esther had a secret. And Esther's secret was this. Now, this is about 100 years after the nation of Israel had been overwhelmed by the Persians and people have been taken into captivity. So she's never been to Israel as we would know it. She's never been to Jerusalem. She's been raised in Persia, and her family has been there for over 100 years. So people begin to assimilate within that culture. And so she's Jewish, but Ahasuerus does not know that she is Jewish. So then this situation arises that there's the protagonist in this story. His name is Haman. I always refer to him as Hateful Haman. Have you ever just met a hateful person? Have you ever met some people you're convinced they don't die, they just nasty away? When I think of Haman, I think of this guy. I'll tell you why in a minute. So Haman, he wants to get rid of the Jews. He becomes upset over the fact that the Jews are in the country, and he decides that he wants to get rid of them. Now, think on a more global perspective on this. This is a racially motivated situation that's going on, but it's not just about the Jews who are in Persia, because Persia is also over the land of Israel as well. So this is going to be genocide. He wants to perpetuate his own version of a Holocaust. When I take the groups over to Israel, we always go to Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Museum there. That's one of the most meaningful places that I've ever been to in my life, for making me want to be a better person and to stand up for the things that are right in this world. And so there's going to be this annihilation of the people. And what has happened in the story is that Haman has gotten the ear of King Ahasuerus, and he's told him, these Jewish people are going to overwhelm this nation. You need to get rid of them. And listen, you don't have to do this. I'll get it done for you. And so he's got the king, and the king is going to sign this decree that's going to eliminate the Jews in the land. And so when this is going on, in steps the person that's the hero in this story, and his name is Mordecai. Mordecai is a cousin of Esther's, and he realizes, King Ahasuerus doesn't realize he's getting ready to sign a decree, and if he signs that decree, his own wife is going to be at risk in this situation. And so Mordecai goes to Esther. And it's this famous passage, and it's in the 4th chapter here. Let me jump over to it. And in the 4th chapter, Mordecai sends for Esther, and he tells her this story. And he says, Esther, even though you're the queen, and here's what you have to understand to kind of put this all into play. The queen and the king didn't just hang out together all the time. The queen was in a separate quarters, and the only way she could go before the king was for the king to request for her to come. Can you imagine how much less argument we would have in our homes today if we had that simple rule in place? Only get together when everybody's in a great mood, right? Wouldn't that eliminate a lot of things? And so Mordecai sends a message to Esther. Now here's the deal. If Esther stays quiet, Esther's protected. She's not going to have to worry about anything. No one knows that she's Jewish. And all the Jews are going to be eradicated. And so she's going to be safe. She's not going to have to go through this annihilation. And so Mordecai sends a word over to Esther. And I want you to really think about what is said here today. I want you to think about where you are today. It's Sunday, May the 14th, in the year 2023, and I want you to think about this as a fact. All of your life has led you to today. Every day that you've lived, every hour that's gone by, every minute that's come off the clock, every second that is ever ticked off, you are in this place right now, and your life has led up to it. Could it be that there's something in this story that could change your life? Could it be that maybe, just like Esther, in this courageous conversation, comes to a realization in her own life that life is about other people and not just me? And what could God do with someone like me? How could he maybe use you to help touch the world? See, when I preach to a group like this, there are some of you in this building, God's going to make you a multimillionaire. Maybe he already has for some of you. What are you going to do with the blessings that you have? Are you going to find ways to be able to bless others? Are you going to find a way to be able to take your wealth and to use it? Because I'm going to share some principles as we go through the last few moments of this message of how God could take and bless and use you in ways that you've never dreamed. And he's looking for that person. So let me show you how Mordecai communicates it to Esther. And here's what he says to her. Now, she is in a safe place. She is the queen. She's been in that role. It took 4 years to prepare her for the role, and now she's been queen for 5 years. So for 9 years of her life, and she was young by the wording when she became queen, probably late teen years, maybe early 20s. And all of a sudden, she's in that position. And for this 9-year segment, do you ever sometimes just feel like, why is God waiting to really show me what he wants me to do? You know, where is God's purpose in this? Let me tell you what it is. It's always about timing. That's why you're in this place today. Your whole life has funneled down to this moment. Would you be open to say, God, what is it that you want me to do from this day forth? How do you want to use my life? In what ways do you want to challenge me? So Mordecai said, you tell Esther this, do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all of the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house are going to perish. Here's what he's saying. Look, God has put you in this position. God has put you here for this time. And I have a plan where I want to use you. But my plan is going to be fulfilled. And I've got you included in my plans. And if you will do what you need to do, then I'm going to use you greatly going forward. But the bottom line is, God's plan is going to get fulfilled. God's plan will come to fruition. But if you choose to just stay quiet, then you and your father's house are going to perish. And then the greatest question, and who knows, he's asking this as a question, and who knows whether or not you've attained royalty for such a time as this. For such a time as this. For such a time as this means in this moment, at this hour, what does God want to do with your life? And would you allow him to radically change your life? That's what's in front of Esther. And so Esther then replies. She said, you go back and you tell Mordecai, you go and assemble all the Jews that are found in Susa and fast for me. She's saying, I'm willing to take this on, but here's the deal. I've got to have people praying for me. And when you and I trust God, it means we take our eyes off of our circumstances, but we put our eyes on God. And the best way you can ever put your eyes on God is that you become a person that will fast and pray. So she says, do this for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day, and I and my maidens are going to fast in the same way. And listen to what she says. And thus I will go into the king, which is not according to the law. In other words, she's saying, I'm getting ready to break protocol. And I'm willing to do it. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away, and he did as Esther commanded him. And so what ends up happening in this story is that Mordecai ends up listening to her. There are multiple principles that I want you to gain from this. For all of our ladies here today, there are principles that you need. For all of our men in this room, principles that you need as well. And I think one of the first ones is when Mordecai says to Esther, you need to do something about this. You need to do something about it. Here's what we tend to do. Don't allow what you can't control to keep you from doing what you can do. See, sometimes we get so paralyzed by situations and things that we end up not doing what we can do because we feel like, well, I can't control everything. And ladies, let's face it, you like control. You like control. And you know why you like control? Because God wired you that way. And because God knows what our families would be like if it was just up to men to raise all of our kids. Utter chaos, I'm just telling you. So ladies like control. And here's what I tend to say. I believe the most basic need of a woman is security. Why? Because of a maternal instinct. Security for her family, security for her kids, security, when she talks to her husband and they talk about family finances and all the other things, that you want security. Sometimes in this world, you can't control everything. But if you can't control everything, then at least don't stop doing what you can do because you can't control every single aspect. I mean, can you imagine how Esther felt when Mordecai is making this statement? And I mean, she could have tried to ease out of it by just simply saying, Mordecai, I can't do this. You realize by law what the law says? I can't just decide that I'm going to go in and I'm going to approach the king. I'll be dead. And that's when Mordecai replies back, don't you think for 1 minute that just because you're in the palace that you're going to escape any more than the rest of the Jews? And if you do keep silent, he said, then our deliverance and our relief is going to rise from another's place, and you and your father's house are going to perish. What does that mean? Your legacy. Your legacy of who you are as a family, of the things that you stand for. And then, of course, that beautiful challenge. And who knows, Esther, maybe the whole reason you ever came into the kingdom was for such a time as this. You see, trusting God means this, that you take your eyes off your circumstances and you keep your eyes on God. You have to learn to take your eyes off your circumstances, the things that you're going through, and you keep your eyes on God. So for just a minute, I want to talk a little bit about the eyes of God. And what does that mean? 2 Chronicles 16:9 says, the eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose heart is completely his. The eyes of the Lord roam to and fro throughout the earth so that he can not just support, but strongly support those whose heart is completely his. And when he says your heart, that's where your thoughts are. That's where your decisions are made. In other words, God is out there looking for people that he can bless. God is out there looking for people that he can use. God is looking for people that not only know how to trust God, but God can trust them. And so what are those people? What are their characteristics? Well, it's things like people who know that just because you can't see God doesn't mean that God is not there. You know, I truly say this, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. It takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to be a Christian believer. That when you look at this universe and the magnificence of it, and you look at the human body, and you just look at everything that's there, I mean, how could you just say, well, this is just random chance? And then when sometimes I'm talking to friends that, consider themselves atheistic in their beliefs, and it's just hard for them to conceptualize God and how all of that works, I just always ask them this question. Do you believe that you would possess like 80% of all knowledge? And sometimes people say, well, I've studied a lot, I've got degrees, I'm a business person, I've done all these things, and yeah, I'm a pretty smart person. Well, if you had 80% of all knowledge, could it be that God is in that remaining 20%? That maybe you just don't understand yet? That maybe you just fully haven't come to a position in yet? Just because you can't see God doesn't mean He's not there. And in this story, although the name of God is not mentioned, fasting is mentioned. And so obviously they were fasting and they were praying to someone. So even though He's not mentioned, it doesn't mean that He's not there. And just because you think He's not there doesn't mean that He doesn't see you. The good news is you may not believe in God, but God believes in you. And God's waiting for you. He's waiting for you to make that decision. He's waiting for you to make that turn. And here's where a lot of us get caught up. We're not seeing God do anything. And just because I can't see Him doing anything immediately does not mean that He's not doing something somewhere that I can't see at this exact moment. That's why Soren Kierkegaard, an existentialist philosopher, said, you live life going forward, but you understand it when you look backward. Steve Jobs, when he did the commencement address at Stanford University, it became one of the most famous speeches that he ever gave. And he was basically quoting the philosophy of Kierkegaard, except Steve Jobs said it like this. You live life moving forward, but when you look back, you can see how the dots connected. You can start seeing, oh man, I happen to be in the right place at the right time at just the right moment. Well, who do you think might have helped that to happen? And you say, well, it's a coincidence. You know what? For me, a coincidence is when God chooses to remain anonymous, and He kind of calls the angels over and goes, hey, y'all, watch this. Whoop! And He just works things out. So understand that the eyes of God, He's looking for every one of us. Then Psalms 32:8. I love this verse. I will instruct you and I will teach you in the way that you shall go. Watch this. I will guide you with my eye upon you. What does that mean? For years, I've read that verse and I really didn't understand it. But here's what it really means. It means that God will guide us with His eye, but He can't guide us. You ever directed your children with your eyes? I guarantee you have. You raise those eyebrows, those kids know what that means. You look at them and you do this little number with your eyes, eyes tell you everything. I mean, they really do. It's just like some of you men, maybe you're in a mall or someplace and you're walking along and some pretty young thing goes walking by you and you never move your head because you've become well trained in life, and your wife is walking beside you and you just kind of rotate your eyeballs over and check her out as she walks by. Do you know that your wife has a spiritual gift? She can hear your eyeballs rotate. She can. It's very loud in her ears. And then you'll be a few feet away from that young lady, and then your wife will ask you a series of a couple of questions. First question is, do you think she was pretty? And of course, you being the God-fearing, honest man you are, respond by going, who? And then, man, She describes her right down to her toenail polish and whatever little decals, she's got on there. Second question, you better get this one right. You think she's prettier than I am? Absolutely not. No way under the sun. Eyes. And he says, I will guide you with my eye. If I look back and I look into the eyes of God, I can see where he's looking. I can see how he's looking. I can see how he is focused. Here's the deal. We all need to turn our eyes upon Jesus. That's how, and he will guide us. He'll let us know what to do. So here's Esther. Hey, Esther, if you keep silent and you don't do anything, Mordecai says, I'm sure that my God is going to use somebody else. But hey, Esther, why don't you let God use you? Why don't you, instead of waiting on someone else, why don't you step up? Matter of fact, Esther, maybe the whole reason you're here is for such a time as this. When he tells her that, she doesn't deny the situation anymore. She doesn't ignore the situation. She stops making excuses. She stops running away. And the irony is, she would have been running away from an opportunity that changes all of history. And she realizes this is going to require more than just my strength. I need strength. So that's when she sends the message back and says, get the Jews in Susa to fast for me and to pray for me so that I can make that decision and face up to my responsibilities. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. And she knows that she's going to have to tell him that she is Jewish. And it's something that she had managed to keep secret from him for 9 years. 9 years. And now she's going to take stock of her situation. And she comes down to this statement. If I perish, then I'll perish. She is willing to sacrifice her life in order to save the lives of her people. Now, we know the end of the story. And the end of the story is it turns out well for everyone. And you remember that guy I mentioned earlier? Oh, Haman, that hateful guy. Well, Haman decided that he was going to hang Mordecai as high as he could hang him. So he ordered gallows to be built twice as high as had ever been built. And so they build the gallows, and instead of Mordecai being hung, Haman gets hung on his own gallows. Let me tell you something. Let you hear me. There's times that people think they're smarter than God, and they start building their little gallows. And they start building that gallows higher. And they'll lie about you. And they'll deceive you. And they'll do all kinds of things because they've got a purpose. They've got a plan. They've got some devious little something set up. And they're building their gallows as high as they can get them because their focus is to destroy you, to destroy your life, to destroy your witness. The devil loves to build his gallows as high as he can build them. But when you turn over everything to God and you come to the point where you go, it's not about me, it's about God, then God can reverse that whole thing. So Haman is the one who gets hung on his own gallows. Esther used the things that she had at her disposal in an amazing way. I mean, she had beauty. The Bible said she was beautiful of face and form. She just looked great. She had that special training for 4 years that she went through. She had an ambitious cousin in old Mordecai. She had a powerful husband, but she didn't have a lot of control, and she didn't have any security in the face of those who had planned to kill her and her people. But at the same time, there were things that she did have and the things that she did rely on. So imagine Mordecai on your shoulder today, saying to you, you've been skills and gifts. You've been given, maybe you're a great salesperson. Maybe you're one of the very best. Maybe you're a fabulous entrepreneur. I'm looking forward to sharing with y'all about a huge entrepreneurial opportunity in the months ahead that I'm going to be involved in that's just incredible. But you've been given all of these kinds of things and privileges and challenges so that at this very moment, you can do what no one else can do, and you can be something that no one else can be. You can be yourself. And God made you just like you are, listen to me, because He wanted someone just like you at just this moment in time. So as I close, and hey guys, y'all can come on out and get the screen, and I'll just finish this up here. So maybe today you're a young person, and you're thinking, dude, I'm too young to be thinking all of my life funnels down to right now. Or maybe you're someone older and you're saying, hey, Ike, honestly, let me get my kids out of college. Let me get their education done, and then maybe we can do something like that. Or maybe you're older and you're saying, Ike, I made those decisions a long time ago. And I'm ready to just kind of take it easy. And then the spirit of Mordecai comes along and says, now I want you to look back at all the parts of your story. And I want you to look at all these things that make you unique. I especially want you to think about the events. And I just went through it. Let me just speak to him. Hey, Thomas, this is for you. You look back at the parts of the story that make you unique, especially the things that seem like setbacks at the time, just setbacks. Those things are going to become vital to you. Listen to me. I've learned far more out of adversity than I've ever learned out of success. Far more. It's in adversity that God refines you and God trains you up. And He's got these things for you. See, I'm so thankful that Esther listened to Mordecai. You say, why? Because if she had not done what she did, then maybe there would have been no more Jews. If there's no Jews, there's no Jesus. Because that's God's chosen people. But Mordecai said, but Esther, listen, if you don't step up, I'm going to get somebody else to step in your place. See, I believe all my heart, one day we're going to stand before God in heaven. And we're not going to give an account for our sin. Our sin is covered. Romans chapter 8, verse 1. Now, therefore, there is no condemnation to those that are in Christ Jesus. We get to heaven, we're not going to be answering sin. You know what we are going to answer for? What did you do with the gifts that I gave you? What are you going to do? And you right now are right where God wants you to be. He wanted you in this place this morning. You are right in the spot. He is El Roy. And the troubles you've been through, well, you know what? Trouble handled rightly honors God. And those defining moments become shining moments in your testimony. See, Esther has a couple of other names. Hadassah was one of Esther's names. But the name Esther literally means star. Your defining moment can become your shining moment when you are at your very, very best. And that's where God wants all of us to be. It starts with knowing Him. I want to pray for you. As a matter of fact, would you go ahead and stand? Because we're not going to sing along. Would you just stand? Father, I pray for people here that need Jesus today. I pray, God, as you brought people here this morning, that they would understand you brought them here. They might have thought they were coming with their mom today to honor her. But you've had them in this place today to hear this message. The story of men and women are selling themselves short and selling God short. Listen, maybe today's the day that you come down around the communion table or down the steps and you just kneel and pray and say, God, I don't want to miss your plan for my life. God, do not let me listen to deceitful voices. God, do not allow the devil to undo what you have put together in my life. If you need Jesus, I'll be right here at the front. Marlon will be right here at the front. Daniel, we'll all be here. But if you want to just come kneel and pray, this is the morning for you to do it. God, Jesus is worthy of his name. The work he wants to do in your life is magnificent. I invite you to do business with him right now.